dashboards, as well as our digital library known as the Reader's Lounge. The Reader's Lounge is available to everyone online, and it has a vast catalog of thousands of books and journals and articles.
Reader's Lounge has three kinds of resources: journal resources, digital resources, and premier resources. Journal resources are primarily focused on international relations, foreign policy, world politics, international law, economics, Pakistan history and its neighbors, and especially the history of Jammu and Kashmir. The premier resources are exclusively designed for the students and researchers. They include HEC Digital Library resources, JSTOR Digital Library access, digital access to foreign affairs, foreign policy, as well as the New York Times and Wall Street Journal are key components of primary resources. Digital content includes audio and visual collection, digital photographs, maps, and datasets.
IPRI provides evidence-based policy input to the government, and for that input we need to analyze data, and for that, as a data scientist, I analyze different kinds of economic and political data so that relevant policy is given to the different government sectors.
IPRI hosts a very vibrant social media. We use our social media to disseminate and put forward infographics and explainers based on topical issues, whatever is going on.
IPRI, being one of the oldest think tanks of Pakistan, has been very successfully documenting all the research work done by our scholars, and that only recently it has opened its vistas to the foreign authors and foreign writers also.
At IPRI Publications, we are proud to bring out a bilateral triple peer blind reviewed scholarly research journal which is sought after worldwide. It aims to deliberate research-oriented input over lawfare, statecraft, international affairs, economics, as well as public governance. It is a rich output and it is very much in demand at home and abroad.
We have also expanded our subscribers to a valuable number.
Moreover, monographs, IPRI paper series and books on topical issues are also covered by IPRI Publications, and they are printed periodically.
IPRI is going to hold Margala Dialogue, which is a signature event, and it is held every year. This is going to be the third one, and this year the topic is Navigating Through the Great Powers Competition, a Developing World's Perspective.
The Margala Dialogue, which is actually the flagship project of the IPRI, and it's an annual feature, in fact, gathers a galaxy of scholars from all around the world.
This year's Margala Dialogue, it aims to see the impact of geoeconomics and technological advancements on global power.
It has compiled many reports which have contributed to the scholarship on particular issues relating to Pakistan's security, Pakistan's economy, Pakistan's politics, and also Pakistan's relations with the outside world.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now commence the last forum, Margala Dialogue 2022, Pakistan at 100. For this session, we will have a panel of 5 distinguished speakers. I will now request the session moderator, Senator Javed Jabbar, and all the session speakers who are available with us in person to kindly join us on the stage.
Our solutions might not be very fancy as other institutions are producing, but we are talking about the slight nudges that are needed in the society for sustainable solutions.
The idea at IPRI is to create an environment conducive for the intellectual development of international legal thought and policy through research, engagement, and collaboration.
Ladies and gentlemen, this panel will be moderated by Senator Javed Jabbar. Senator Jabbar has distinctions in diverse fields. He's received numerous international and national honors for his contributions and achievements. He's a former senator and has served in 3 federal cabinets. His 15th book, Pathways Selected Writings, between 2010 and 2015, won the UBL Literature Prize for the Best English Non-Fiction Book at the 9th Karachi Literature Festival 2017. In the past 16 months, 3 books of his political memoirs have been published and become bestsellers on Amazon. He's also chairman and co-founder of multiple organizations, including the Social Policy and Development Center and Strengthening Participatory Organization. I now hand over the forum to our esteemed moderator, Senator Javed Jabbar, for conducting the further proceedings of this forum. Over to you, sir.
As the onomatopoeic name indicates, the Grand National Dialogue aims at
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
generating
Ambassador Dr. Raza Muhammad,
of concern to the country.
Janjua Saab, Chairman of the Board, former Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, who is very much here, Inamul Haq Saab, whose esteemed name has not yet been uttered. Is there a ban on naming you as the Honorable Esteemed Head? And distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Ambassador Raza Muhammad Saab, for giving me this opportunity to impose myself on these innocent speakers here, but even worse, impose myself on this not so innocent gathering in front of me. But thank you for your hospitality. And it's been a very stimulating past few sessions. Each session has really made us think about things we already know about, but also made us think about things we did not focus on sufficiently. So truly, the panorama of the spectrum of issues opened up by this theme is really very well reflected in the care and the thoughtfulness with which the program was formulated, and then the selection of all the speakers, excluding myself, all of them of estimable value and reputation, who have enriched the deliberations. And very unconventionally, earlier today we had a head of state who, despite being 2 years junior to me in school, has become a good boy. I mean, he's, the other day, I mean, he will be very tolerant if I share with you the episode a few months ago when I was there at the Aiwan-e-Sadr. I said, "Dekho kya haal hai." I mean, kal ke bacche aaj kal sadr ban gaye riyasat ke. But we had a very cordial. Yesterday's children have become heads of state. But he's always been a very distinct individual, even as a schoolboy. He obeyed whatever the prefects told him, and he was a very diligent student, and well deserves. But one could see that the gentleman reads, which is such a great gift to have, a quest to learn and not be overwhelmed by the protocol of office and be consumed by the ceremonial tape cutting and all the other things that go with that office. So whether it was him or whether it was the last session, which was also very, very interesting, it was courageous, it was outspoken. There were some aspects on which I strongly disagreed, and I had to restrain myself from sharing my disagreement because one must respect time. But here we are in this, perhaps the final session. And thank you for putting me in the company of such remarkable individuals, each in their own right, whether here or online. Look at them. Senator Krishna Kumari from Tharparkar, Sindh. And I do need to point out that before she was down on earth, when she was up in heaven, in the year 1985-86, I sponsored a girls' school in Tando, Kolachi, where she went to school later, some years later, and represents Sindh. And I'm so proud that she is now the senator from Sindh, mashallah. And there next to her is the mountain climbing in more senses than one. Not just K2, which I'm sure you'll conquer one day, but cleaning up the environment. I mean, people far bigger built than this slim, delicate girl hesitate to ever go near a mountain. She's been going up there to clean up the garbage left behind by mountaineering teams. And she's a true climatologist. And Dr. Ali Hasnain from academia, the fortification of Lams in Lahore, who has contributed richly to academic discourse and to writing, and who will share his thoughts today. And of course, I will give you a formal introduction when they come online, but we also have Mr. Ali Jahangir Siddiqui, who is a banker, also a person from the financial services sector, a very well-known group, but also served with notable distinction, even though briefly, as Pakistan's ambassador to the USA. And we have Ms. Maheen Rahman, who once shared a panel with recently in Karachi, who is CEO of Infrazameen, and a very interesting initiative in Pakistan. So friends, we have the advantage of learning from our panelists later today, but let me inflict some initial thoughts just to probably set the ball rolling. I want to begin by remembering a gentleman called former Brigadier Shaukat Qadir. Back in the year 2000, when I had to also ex officio serve as chairman of IPRI when I was in the General Musharraf cabinet. Brigadier Shaukat Qadir joined IPRI and had also already established his credentials as a very astute analyst and a commentator on current affairs, global affairs. Tragically, we lost him a few days ago. So I just want to observe a minute of silence in his memory. Brigadier Shaukat Qadir, a very well-known, respected writer and part of IPRI's history. May his soul rest in peace. IPRI has a very interesting four-word theme, which you see here. Research, innovation, dialogue, policy. Very comprehensive. By coincidence, 3 days ago, I received an email. And with the email came a picture that is irresistible to share with you, because it has a lot to do with the second word, innovation. Now see what this says. Center for Eradicating Innovation and Establishing Sunnah. MashaAllah. Mane, ab is environment mein, this is the context in which we are talking about. I want to trace, and it says Jamaatul Zalatil Biddati wa Qamati Sunnah. Now, this is in, I don't know where it is located, but I mean, I haven't yet traced it. Does anyone know where this is located? Sure? They have affiliates here working very quietly, I'm sure. But innovation, of course, is taken in another context here. But the word, I mean, one word can mean so many different things to many people. We were talking about the duality and the multiplicity of perceptions. But we can't get away from the fact that in a country that is 97% Muslim, where religion-based political parties which had originally opposed the creation of Pakistan have now become the custodians of what they call Islamic ideology, which has never been defined. There is no such thing as one single agreed definition of what is Islamic ideology. Yet public office holders like myself have to take an oath saying that we shall affirm and remain loyal to Islamic ideology. There's such a need for conceptual, intellectual research on this very basic, fundamental subject. What do we mean by Islamic ideology? That's a whole subject. The only reason I highlighted that was to point out that when we visualize Pakistan at the year 100 years of Pakistan, will religion, the kind of religion that has been misinterpreted for the last 75 years and rejected roundly by the people of Pakistan, in 11 general elections, not a single religion-based political party has been given the right to vote at the federal level. Only once the MMA and NWFP at that time got the right to form a coalition. But how wise of the people of Pakistan that they do not allow these interpretations of religion to interfere with common sense. So, we have a very exciting panel. May I now request Senator Krishna Kumar to share her views. Thank you. 10 minutes, and then we'll have questions. Worked for many years on the rights of bonded labor.
Thank you. All honorable guests, Assalamu alaikum, Namaste, good evening. I am very thankful for giving me an opportunity to participate in this Magda Dialogue program. And also thank you for allowing me to share my views with you. As I introduced, I was senator elected on a women general seat from the platform of Pakistan People Party in 2018. I actually belong to Koli community, which is most backward and deprived community inhabited of district in Lower Sindh. I belong to Tharparkar, the desert area of Pakistan. I want to quote an important address of our national hero, our founder of Pakistan, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who while addressing the first Constitutional Assembly on 11th August 1947, he said, "Today you are free. You are free to go your temple. You are free to go your mosque and to any other place for worship in this state of Pakistan. You may belong to any religion, caste or creed. That has nothing to do with the business of the state." This was the vision of our national leader regarding minorities of Pakistan. Later on, Shahid Zulfikar Ali Bhutto gave 1973 Constitution, which also granted freedom of religion to all the citizens of Pakistan. Minorities are free to practice their religion as well as build worship places. The Constitution also guarantees political inclusion of minorities by reserving a quota in Parliament and all provincial assemblies. Although our Constitution and state safeguard minorities' rights, our government support and protect our rights, but often we face discrimination and social justice at some places. The issues like religious discrimination, forced conversion, illegal and forcefully occupation on properties of minorities, worship place, and non-implementation of minority quota in jobs. So we need our attention. Otherwise, minorities across the globe are living under constant threats. Across the border in India, Sikh and Muslims are persecuted. Similarly, in Europe, Islamophobia is on rise. And similarly, ethnic minorities are also targeted. In Pakistan, these issues is minor. So I have to say that overall Pakistan is a safe for place for minority, religious minorities. And my example is in front of you. I have elected on general seat in upper house of the Pakistan, with the vote of both majority and minority members of the National Assembly, Sindh Assembly. After my success, I was fully encouraged and supported by my party leaders and my seniors. Especially my party chairman Bilal Bhutto Zardari Sahab and President Asaf Ali Zardari Sahab and other senior members and even other political parties leadership. I feel proud that I got opportunity to chair upper house on different occasions. Finally, I hope that Pakistan is in a near future. Pakistan will come on the top of the list of the developed countries, which protect their minority rights, women rights, and no any discrimination will be acceptable in the name of religion, state, and creed. Thank you so much. Pakistan Zindabad.
Thank you, Senator Sahiba. Very moving and powerful statement you made, and she represents a phenomenon that is not widely known. In the year 2018, apart from the indirectly elected Senate, 3 Muslim candidates or more Muslim candidates in Sindh, or more Muslim candidates, wait till I give you the good news. 3 non-Muslim candidates on general directly elected seats scored more votes than Muslim candidates. One in Jamshoro and one in Mirpur Khas for the Sindh Provincial Assembly and one in Tharparkar for the National Assembly, where one can say 46% are Hindus, but that doesn't change the fact that even there non-Muslim candidate got support from Muslims. So the people of Pakistan are very pluralist, contrary to the impression given by some extremists and fanatics. So Senator Krishna Kumari is a fine example of people transcending those biases that a minority has. The other minority, not religious minority. So, open to questions or comments or statements or expressions of any kind about this subject that she has touched upon, the rights of minorities. Ji, please go ahead. Do identify yourself. Thank you.
Let me appreciate you for your such insightful session.
I'm not, Arey Baba, मेरे पास कोई fake degree नहीं है. I'm still a student. I'm not a doctor. So, खुदा ना खास्ता कल कोई कहेगा कि मैं अपने आप को डॉक्टर के तौर पे पेश कर रहा हूँ. मैं बिल्कुल नहीं हूँ. मैं आम एक तालिब इल्म.
So should I call you Mr. Jabbar?
हाँ, Mr. ठीक है.
Yeah, thank you so much for your such insightful session, and in your early comments, as you mentioned about Senator Krishna Kumari. First of all, let me introduce myself. I am political assistant to Chief Minister Punjab on Human Rights and Minority Affairs. Senator Sahiba is my course mate, and I am a journalist as well. My question for Senator Sahiba is, पाकिस्तान में जो फोर्स कन्वर्जन्स होती हैं या फिर उनकी फोर्स्ड मैरिजेस हो रही हैं और वो भी मुस्लिम मुल्ला के साथ, तो लड़कों को तो नहीं उठाया जाता, सिर्फ लड़कियों को क्यों उठाया जाता है? इसके पीछे क्या रीज़न हो सकती है वो आप बताएंगे मुझे, और इसके साथ साथ मुझे ये बताएं कि किस तरह इसकी रोकथाम की जाए. What is your suggestion on the prevention of early forced conversions and marriages of minority girls in Pakistan, and how can you stop? Thank you.
क्यों हो रही है वो तो मेरे से ज़्यादा मेरे ख्याल जावेद जब्बार साहब इनका आपको रिप्लाई सही देंगे. और रोकथाम के लिए मैं, क्योंकि हमारे पास सेनेट में भी एक बिल आया हुआ था जो आज पास हो जाता तो मेरे ख्याल में कहीं ना कहीं थोड़ा उसको सपोर्ट मिल जाती कि इस तरह की जो वाक़यात होती है उसको कम हो जाए या ख़त्म हो जाए. लेकिन अनफॉर्चुनेटली वो पास नहीं हुआ था. और मैं दोबारा अपने मेम्बरान को भी, अपने कुलीग्स को भी कहूँगी कि उसको अमेंडमेंट करके उसको दोबारा वापस लेके आए तो कम से कम ये हमारे जो इस तरह के जो वाक़यात हो रहे हैं वो उसको उसकी रोकथाम कर सकें.
May I just paraphrase that in English so that everyone online and our Honorable Minister for Portugal may also hear what she said. She said that it is very unfortunate that a bill that sought to criminalize forced conversion was not allowed to be passed in the Senate because of the opposition of what I'm sure was not the majority. And this is a hallmark of our attitude to this small group that can even hold up the certification of a film called Joyland by addressing about 20 letters or 30 letters in the name of Islam being under threat and force them to edit some scenes out. That kind of mindset has always got disproportionate attention from the state, from parliament, from the media, even sometimes from the judiciary. Though the judiciary, to be fair, has withstood pressure, has stood up for the rights of non-Muslims and transgenders for the first time. So the answer was that it is unfortunate that the Senate could not pass that bill. But as you know, Senator Sahiba, this bill cannot just be confined to the federal territory of Islamabad. It has to be passed by each of the 4 provincial assemblies. And in this respect, I am proud to belong to the same province as she, because Sindh has passed the Early Marriage Prevention Act, which, mind you, has stalled in the National Assembly, again due to a small group of MNAs who think that this is un-Islamic. So at least Sindh is showing the way for the rest of the country to take forward legislation in support of religious minorities. Any other? Yes, please. Go ahead, take a mic.
Assalamu alaikum. Namaste, ladies senator. I am Zuhair from Qaeda University. Ma'am, if I say Pakistan is more safe and secure country for community minorities, what will आप इस पर क्या कहेंगे अगर हम वाज़ा करें कि इंडिया की निस्बत पाकिस्तान जो है ज़्यादा अक़लियतों के लिए महफूज न लगे? थैंक यू.
मैं तो इसका यही कहूँगी कि क्योंकि मैंने अपना एग्जांपल आपको दिया है, क्योंकि जितना स्पेस माइनॉरिटी को पाकिस्तान में मिल रहा है इतना मुझे कहीं किसी और कंट्री में नज़र नहीं आया, क्योंकि मैंने और भी कंट्री विजिट किए हैं और हमारे जो बॉर्डर की उस तरफ जो मुल्क है उनका भी हमने देखा है, कश्मीर का भी हमने देखा है, तो इतना वो हमें वो नज़र नहीं आ रहा है. तो लेकिन पाकिस्तान में हमें स्टेट हमारी सपोर्ट करता है, हमारी हुकूमत हमारी सपोर्ट करता है, हमारा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन हमारी सपोर्ट करता है. तो ये कहीं अगर सोसाइटी में इस तरह का कोई इश्यूज़ हो रहे हैं तो उसको हम स्टेट का नाम से नहीं दे सकते. جو کمیونٹی میں ہو رہا ہے, سوسائٹی میں ہو رہا ہے, اس کو ہم ہمارے ادارے بھی اس کو ہینڈل کریں گے, اور ہماری گورنمنٹ ہے وہ بھی ہمارے سپورٹ میں کھڑی ہے, تو انشاءاللہ ایک دن ہم ضرور اس میں کامیاب ہوں گے.
Thank you. To summarize, she thought that the society itself needs to take measures, not only the state, the society, a society is also responsible. So the need for reform of societal attitudes in Pakistan, but at the same time she commends the fact that the state, at least on paper, if not sometimes in practice, does give minimal protection to minorities. Incidentally, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the minorities in Pakistan, religious minorities, have 2 votes. ہم جیسے بیچارے ظالم مسلمانوں کو صرف 1 ووٹ ملتا ہے. We Muslims have only 1 vote. But non-Muslims can vote for the reserved seats, which are reserved only for non-Muslims, and you can vote for wrong, bad candidates like myself. You can't? You can. آپ کریں.
نہیں, ایسے میرے خیال پہلے تو ہوتا تھا, اس کے بعد جب 1973 کانسٹیٹیوشن آیا, اس کے بعد ابھی تمام پاکستانیوں کو برابر کی رائٹس ہے ووٹ کے لیے.
Interpretation of that right later. But anyway, Ji. Any others? Ji. Yes, please. Last session में से. Why don't you? You didn't get a chance. You didn't get a chance. You have spoken in the previous set. Please, आप पहले.
Can I, sir?
He has not yet had a chance. इसके बाद जी.
سینیٹر کرشنا کماری صاحبہ, آپ کو دیکھ کے بڑی خوشی ہوتی ہے, اور جو کچھ آپ کر رہی ہیں اس سے باقی لوگوں کو تقویت ملتی ہے. آج کل آپ کے علاقے میں جو باڑھ آئی ہے اس کے بعد سے مطلب سیلاب کے بعد سے کافی برے حالات ہیں, تو اس کے بارے میں کچھ بتائیے, اور آپ کیا چاہتی ہیں, کیا کچھ ہونا چاہیے اس علاقے کو اس وقت ایڈ دینے کے لیے, یا کیا پریسنگ پرابلمز؟
Question relates to requesting her to enlighten us about how the terrible floods have affected parts of Sindh and what should be done, and is anything being done, right? Please go ahead, Senator.
Thank you. یہ اس میں تو ہم یہ کر سکتے ہیں کہ کافی پانی اوپر سے آ رہا تھا, جو انڈیا سے آیا, پھر پورے پاکستان کا پانی آخر اینڈ میں ہمارا سندھ وہ ہوتا ہے, تو اس میں اسی وجہ سے سندھ کے جو بیراجی ایریا تھے وہ افیکٹڈ ہوئے ہیں سارے. تقریباً 13 ڈسٹرکٹ تو بہت زیادہ سخت متاثر ہوئے ہیں, اور اس میں سندھ گورنمنٹ تو اپنے طریقے سے کام کر رہے ہیں, وہ ابھی تک کر رہے ہیں کہ ابھی تک لوگوں کو ریسکیو اور ریبلیٹیشن کے اس پہ لگی ہوئی ہیں, جس کی وجہ سے ہمارے جو لوکل باڈیز الیکشن ہے وہ بھی پوسٹ پون ہو رہے ہیں, متاثر ہو رہے ہیں. اور اس میں ہم سب کا فرض ہے, کیونکہ گورنمنٹ تو اپنے طریقے سے کام کرے, لیکن ہم سب کو جہاں ہمیں موقع ملتا ہے, جہاں ہمیں پہنچ پاتے ہیں اتنا, ہم وہاں جا کے اپنا کام, کیونکہ یہ انسانیت کے ناطے ہم سب کا فرض ہے کہ ہم اپنے لوگوں کے لیے کچھ نہ کچھ ان کی سپورٹ کریں. تو پورے پاکستان کو میں یہی کہوں گی, ابھی بھی کہوں گی کہ وہاں کے ایریاز کے لوگوں جا کے آپ ان کی وارسی کریں, اور سندھ گورنمنٹ کے ساتھ مل کے اور اپنے طریقے سے بھی. میں سندھ گورنمنٹ کا پارٹ ہوں, لیکن میں اپنے طریقے سے جا کے فنڈ ریزنگ کرتی ہوں دوستوں سے, اور اپنے جیب خرچ سے بھی, اور وہاں میڈیکل کیمپس کرنا, ان کی چھوٹی موٹی جو ضرورتیں ہیں ان کی وہ پوری کرنا, اس طرح کے جتنا کنٹریبیوشن ہو سکتا ہے میں اپنے طریقے سے کر رہی ہوں. تو اس طرح ہم سب کو مل کے کرنا, سپورٹ کرنی چاہیے اپنے پاکستانی بھائیوں بہنوں کی, تاکہ ہم زندگی معمول کے مطابق واپس جلدی آ جائیں.
Thank you. The scale of the tragedy, she thinks, requires a combined effort of all citizens and the state. Her party is in power in Sindh, and it is doing its utmost, but clearly much more needs to be done, and she on an individual basis is also contributing by mobilizing funds and personally visiting the affected areas. We'll take 2 more questions and then move on. Ji.
Assalamu alaikum. میرا نام شفقت ہے, تو میرا بھی سندھ سے تعلق ہے. میم نے بات کی کہ مائنارٹیز کو ادھر سندھ میں رائٹ دیے جاتے ہیں, تو اگر رائٹ دیے جاتے ہیں تو مسلمان اتنے تعداد میں کیوں ہو رہے ہیں, اور دوسری بات کہ آپ نے اتنی مطلب ریشو اتنا جو ہے نا غیر مسلمان جو مینارٹی ہیں وہ اسلام قبول کر رہے ہیں، تو مولوی ان کو اتنا فورس کر کے وہ اسلام قبول کروا دیتے ہیں ان کو. اور دوسری بات آپ نے بات کی کہ پیپلز پارٹی ہمیں ہی رائٹ نہیں دے رہی سندھ میں، تو مینارٹیز کو کیسے رائٹ دے گی؟ تھینک یو سو مچ.
I think even non-Urdu speakers will get the thrust of the question, but it was basically very skeptical about some of the statements made by the Honorable Senator, because the gentleman thinks that if things were all right in Sindh, then how come these forced conversions and kidnappings of minority girls is taking place? So, aapko party ka bhi difa karna hai aur haqiqat ko bhi batana hai. Shukriya.
اس میں تو اگر آپ کا تعلق سندھ سے ہے اور آپ کو مسلم کمیونٹی سے، مسلم میجارٹی سے ہے، تو پھر تو آپ کا ہی فرض بنتا ہے نا کہ آپ اپنی مینارٹی کی کیئر کریں اور ان کی سپورٹ کریں. آپ مجھ سے سوال پوچھنے سے پہلے آپ اپنے دل سے سوال پوچھیں، اور آپ اپنی جو مائنارٹی ہے ان کے لیے کیا کر رہے ہیں وہ آپ دیکھیں، کیونکہ یہاں پہ کسی حکومت کے بس کی بات نہیں ہے، اور نہ ہی حکومت جا کے آپ کو یہ کہتی ہے کہ بھائی آپ جائیں کسی کی لڑکی اٹھائے یا کسی کی بچی اٹھائے آپ ان کو کنورٹ کریں. وہ آپ کو حکومت نہیں کہتی. وہ ایک سوسائٹی میں اس طرح کی واقعات ہوتی ہے، اور ان کے سوسائٹی کا آپ بھی حصہ ہے اور میں بھی حصہ ہوں. تو اس میں جو رول پلے ہماری میجارٹی کر سکتی ہے وہ مینارٹی نہیں کر سکتی. باقی سندھ گورنمنٹ اپنے طریقے سے کام کر رہی ہے، اور آج میں یہاں بیٹھی ہوں تو سندھ گورنمنٹ کی وجہ سے بیٹھی ہوں، پارٹی کی وجہ سے بیٹھی ہوئی ہوں. آپ دیکھیں کہ پاکستان کی تاریخ میں یہ پہلی بار ہوا ہے کہ ہماری کمیونٹی سے کوئی اپر ہاؤس تک پہنچا ہے. اگر پیپل پارٹی نے کیا ہے. اگر مجھے بتایا کہ کوئی اور پارٹی ایسی ہے کہ جنہوں نے کوئی گراؤنڈ لیول سے لے کے کسی غریب خاندان سے کسی کو نمائندگی دی ہو، یا ان کو پاکستان کی تاریخ میں پہلی بار کیوں ہوا ہے؟
تھینک یو. یہ کہہ رہی ہیں کہ شی از سیئنگ دیٹ ریئلی it is up to those who can do anything, whether they are in a political party or not in a political party, to help improve it. The reason why she is here today is because of her party and because of the province of Sindh, and the fact that there were no women from her community particularly previously in the Senate. It's another matter that part of the historical record will show that when yours truly tried to move an amendment to the Constitution in 1985, November, that bill was not even allowed to be admitted. But such is the passage of history. Koi baat nahi. Last two very quick questions. We have to go to the next speaker. Ji.
Thank you so much. My name is Ishtiyaq Ali Mehkri. I belong to IPRI. My question is that, sir, every state or statehood has a narrative from which it derives its strength. Having agreed with that, we have this dictum from the founder of the nation, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, on 11th of August, that every Muslim will cease to be a Muslim, a Hindu will cease to be a Muslim after the creation of the state. So with these two things, do you think that while we are discussing Pakistan at 100, should Pakistan be a Republic of Pakistan or an Islamic Republic of Pakistan? Thank you.
Are you addressing this naughty question to her or to me? To me? I only answer questions at the end, so I'm not going to evade your question. I will deal with it in my concluding remarks. Thank you. Last question. Ji.
Sir, my name is Ishan Ali, student at National Defense University. جنرلی ایک ڈیولپنگ کنٹریز کے بارے میں ایک پرسپیکٹو ہوتا ہے لوگوں کا کہ وہاں پہ مائنورٹیز جو ہیں وہ سیف نہیں ہیں. تو انڈیا میں بھی مطلب انڈیا کے بارے میں بھی لوگ اس طرح سوچتے ہیں اور پاکستان کے بارے میں بھی اس طرح لوگ سوچتے ہیں. تو میں سینیٹر صاحبہ سے یہ کہنا چاہوں گا کہ آپ ان لوگوں کے لیے کیا کہنا چاہیں گے کہ پاکستان میں آپ کے لیے حکومت کی طرف سے اور اسپیشلی عوام کی طرف سے کون سے اس طرح کے اسٹیپس اٹھائے گئے ہیں جس سے یہ بات آپ غلط ثابت کر سکتی ہیں. تھینک یو.
What are the specific ways you can prove that steps have been taken to improve the status of minorities in Pakistan? Please go ahead.
انڈیا میں جہاں تک میں نے سنا ہے, نیوز میں پڑھا ہے, تو وہاں جو غریب طبقہ ہے, جو مینارٹی وہاں کی جو ہے, کولی, بھیل, میگواڑ, उनको शेड्यूल कास्ट, अनटचेबल, दलित के नाम से जाना जाता है। उनको एक साइड पे दीवार को लगा के रखा हुआ होता है। लेकिन यहाँ पे मेरा ताल्लुक एक फार्मर घराने से है, मेरे फादर वो एक फार्मर हैं और अभी तक वो अभी भी आप फ़ोन करके पूछेंगे तो वो खेतों में बैठी होंगी। तो वो यहाँ से ताल्लुक है, लेकिन मैं यहाँ अपर हाउस में बैठी हूँ। ये फ़र्क है पाकिस्तान और इंडिया में।
Thank you. She's pointing out that here she is, her father is still tilling the fields as a simple, straightforward peasant farmer. And here she is sitting in the upper house of parliament, a situation that she cannot visualize or see in our neighboring country. Though to be fair to our neighboring country, and I don't feel like being fair to it because it is so unfair to Pakistan, but to be fair, a woman from what we call a scheduled caste has been elected Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh in the past, Mayawati. And Jagjeevan Ram, also from those castes, was served as Defense Minister. So to be fair, they have also had those examples. But now, let me go to the second speaker. Thank you very much, Senator Krishna Kumari. And we now request online Mr. Ali Jahangir Siddiqui, whose bio data very briefly is there, but he's a board member of the Atlantic Council. He has previously served as our ambassador to the US and special assistant to the Prime Minister of Pakistan with the status of Minister of State. He also has several projects under his belt as a venture capitalist. So, Mr. Ali Siddiqui, the floor is yours for the next 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is my voice clear?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you very much, Jabbar Saab. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm delighted to be back at the Margala Dialogue. It's my third year being back here, so I'm very, very happy to see its progress. Our theme for this session, Pakistan at 100, is to find a pathway for Pakistan's prosperity over the next 25 years. And as an entrepreneur, I've always imagined myself as somebody who has an optimistic outlook on life. But unfortunately, I don't have much optimism to share with you today. As Jabbar Saab and Senator Kumari highlighted, there are many measures to examine where Pakistan will be at 100, and they took the very important area of religion in Pakistan, the role of religion in Pakistan at 100. I would instead focus on economics, because without resources, it's very, very difficult to have prosperity. And before we look at a path forward to get Pakistan to a pathway of prosperity at 100, I'd like to set the baseline by sharing some economic data very briefly. Many of you will find this data very familiar, but I think it's important to establish the baseline and then project what we can do in the next 25 years as we get to 100 to create prosperity, to improve the lives of our citizens. I will warn you that this data is not for the faint-hearted, but there is truth in data, and we must be truthful before we can find a way out of what I see as a very, very difficult situation. And on the data, it's based on public information, but I would urge you not to focus on the numbers themselves, but rather the trends that those numbers capture. The data is about Pakistan and a few peer group countries, the South Asian countries, Iran and Indonesia as large Muslim countries that are developing. So with that, I'm just going to share my screen. I seem to be having difficulty.
Are you controlling the screen, or are we supposed to? Yeah.
I am, but IPRI also has a copy. So if IPRI could put up their copy, that might make it easier.
Mehri Saab, could you ensure that we see the data? Meanwhile, if you would just like to quote that data verbally,
certainly, I can.
Go ahead.
I can certainly keep going. If we were to look at Pakistan the current GDP of Pakistan, it's about a little bit behind Bangladesh. So in absolute terms, Bangladesh is about $460 billion, and Pakistan is about 376. India is 3.5 trillion. So, and if we look at it on a per capita basis between Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Iran, Pakistan is at about $1,600 per capita. The other countries are in the mid-2000s, and Indonesia is the only exception, which is at 4,500. Were we to, and I know these numbers are a bit hard to follow without looking at them on the screen, but were we to project out in 2047, Pakistan's GDP does grow, and this growth is based on IMF's numbers for the next 5 years and extrapolated for the following 20 years. So let's say Pakistan continues down the same trajectory at which we are today, which is growing at about 5% a year. Which, you know, is not a number that is disappointing on its own. 5% a year growth is not terrible. In fact, it's okay. But what that means is, with our population growth and our inflation, what that means is that if we go down the current trajectory, our per capita GDP goes from 1,500 to 5,200. So it goes up 3.5 times. So in 25 years more, when we are 100, we will be 3.5 times more prosperous. Now, if you compare that to our peer group, India will go from its current number of 2,500 to 24,000. We will be at 5,500. The average citizen of India will be, 4 to 5 times more prosperous than we are. Bangladesh will be at 32,000. So in 25 years, the average Bengali will be 6 times more prosperous and wealthy in terms of annual income than the average Pakistani. And the reason that's happening, Indonesia, of course, is much higher. So the reason this is happening is we have a significantly higher population growth. In 25 years, Pakistan's population will be 55% more than today. Let's say we grow by 50%, just to use a simple number. We will be 50% larger in population in 25 years. And all these other countries will be between 10 and 20% larger. So they're sharing the resources and that growth amongst fewer people. And second, despite our high growth rate or reasonable growth rate of 5%, we have an imbalanced economy where we have high inflation and therefore high currency devaluation compared to these others, which are much stronger exporting economies. And other than Iran and Indonesia, the South Asian countries are energy importers like us. So there's no excuse for us having a poor structure of economy where we don't generate enough exports. So we take our GDP growth and we lose a significant part of it because of inflation. So what I'm saying is, compared to the other countries, we perform incredibly poorly. And what that means, are you able to see the numbers on screen now?
Sorry, yes. Why is my voice booming like this, please?
Okay, thank you. So you've seen these two slides, and I think the important thing to note on the per capita GDP on the slide you see, slide 3 in front of you, is that the definition of the World Bank for a country that is high on the Human Development Index, sorry, could we go back? Yeah. High on the Human Development Index is that the country should be a high-income country. The current definition of a high-income country is $13,000 of GDP per capita. So if you look at this screen in front of you on the right side, in 25 years, Pakistan will only achieve 40%, 5,200 out of 13,000, 40% of what is required today to be a high income and therefore a high human development country. The definition of high income will obviously be much higher in 25 years. I'm just using today's definition. So we will rank even more poorly then in 25 years. But at the moment, the other countries in our peer group, including sanctioned Iran, with all its difficulties, is going to be a high-income country. All of these countries are going to be high-income countries, and many of these are going to be 2 or 3 times the current definition of what is a high-income country, and therefore the current definition of what is a high human development country. If we move on 2 slides forward, please. To health expenditure, slide 5, or the next one from here. What this means is that if you look at our average citizen, we cannot spend a significant amount of money on their healthcare. We cannot improve their lifespans, and many other countries in similar situations to us with similar problems, or in some cases, different problems, but extreme ones, will be able to spend significantly on their citizens' healthcare. If we go to the next slide. In education, the story is very, very similar. So even in education, unfortunately, because we have no economic resources that are significant in the next 25 years, we will spend much more than we are spending today. But it will be a fraction of what other people are able to spend. Maybe please go to the next slide. In malnutrition or infant nutrition and child nutrition, the story is going to be similar. We're going to be left far behind. And while it's not a situation which is
sorry to interrupt. 3 more minutes. Thank you.
Certainly. Can you please go to the next slide? And we can skip this, but again, we keep talking about electricity production, but not access enough times. And while we produce a significant portion of electricity, we're not able to make it affordable or get it to people, while other countries already have made that ubiquitous. The next slide, please. And lifespan. So we are not able to increase lifespans meaningfully, and many countries are running 1 or 2 decades ahead of us. So I will stop here. We could stop the presentation. I think this is the last slide anyway. And I will just say that I have not touched climate change because there's an expert on the panel, so let's not talk about that. But just on economics, the conclusions that I can draw from this data is that either our government policies, and not just today, our government policies in the last 10 or 20 years have failed us, either in intellect or in execution, or both. And that's one conclusion. Government policies across governments, across decades, have failed us, either in intellect or in execution, or both. And the second conclusion that I would draw is that marginal changes at this point where we are will not change the quality of life for our citizens in 25 years. So if we want to make a real change to Pakistan's prosperity and the citizens' prosperity, making small changes now is not going to help much. So where do we go from here? If marginal changes are not going to change anything, and current policies, including adjusting for political bias and time, because I looked at policies in the last 10 to 20 years, if current policies are not the right ones, then where do we go? So the answer must lie in a dramatic and thoughtful redesign of all of our economic policies with a view to change everything: tax, public finances, the withdrawal of government from competing with the private sector, i.e. privatization, government that is held accountable by the outcomes achieved rather than false promises and speeches and short-term infrastructure. So the situation that I present is grim, but if we look at the situation for Pakistan alone, basically what happens is, at current policy and at current growth, in 25 years, our share of world prosperity stays the same. We share it with more people, so we're not as better off as we are, whereas everybody else becomes 4 to 6 times more prosperous in our peer group. Now, is it recoverable? Is there hope? Well, India, as we all know, did it in 30 years. So with the Chidambaram and Manmohan Singh reforms about 30 years ago, India went down a path to make dramatic change. So it is possible, but it's only possible if it is done now. So if we have to solve for a prosperous Pakistan at 100, we must note that we are already decades behind, but 25 years of effort can solve this significantly. So I will stop here, and I'm very happy to expand in the discussion of the Q&A. Back to you, Javed Saab. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a very well-based presentation. It doesn't make us jump with joy, but that's not the purpose of requesting your erudition, and we have scope for 2 questions or comments. No, you've already used it in the previous session. Anyone who has been deprived so far of his freedom of expression? Yes, there are many, many victims here. No, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Mr. Ambassador, Pakistan have facing multiple issues, especially political instability, economic devastation, and especially climate disaster almost become main cause to lose $30 billion. And according to World Bank, we need $50 billion between 2022 to 2030. And how we can come out of these things, and should we need bold step to collect our tax, especially direct taxes.
Thank you. Second question. You put up your hand last time. You were not given the opportunity, so here's your opportunity. And we'll then request Ali Siddiqui Saab to respond.
My question to Jahangir Siddiqui Saab that before 18th Amendment, most of the parties were blaming center that the resources are not equitably distributed among all the provinces. But after 18th Amendment, after the passing of NFC award, resources are distributed among all the provinces, among all the federating units, but even though result is 0, who is responsible for this? Whether provinces, state capacity?
Thank you. Right. Thank you. Ali Siddiqui Saab, please respond.
Certainly. I want to respond to the climate part and the cost of climate mitigation, since we have an expert on panel and I'm not one. But certainly on tax, amongst the whole process of drastic reform, and I will say again, nothing can be achieved for us if there's marginal reform. So if there has to be drastic reform, tax has to be part of it. We must take very bold steps on tax and a variety of other areas, so I would agree with that statement that the question raised. And in terms of climate mitigation and the cost, while I'm not addressing climate, I will just say that rather than focus on what the cost of mitigation is, if we fix our economy, we will be in a better position to afford mitigation, not just go around the world and ask for handouts, which we must do also, because that's the position we're in. But we should have the resources to solve for those problems ourselves. With respect to the 18th Amendment, and I think the question alludes to the fact that, well, I wouldn't say fact, but the question alludes to prior to the 18th Amendment, the provinces claimed that resources were not fairly distributed, and post the 18th Amendment, the federal government claims that provinces are not fairly, resources are not fairly distributed. Without making a political comment, because that is not my goal, I will make an economic comment, which is that this is a question of accountability. Whoever has the resources needs to be held accountable for those resources. So today, if provinces have the resources for healthcare and education, well, the question is, are the provinces being held accountable for delivering healthcare and education outcomes that we need? So, and I would argue that the outcome gains have been marginal. This is not about 18th Amendment. This is about that the people and the government the people need to hold the government accountable. And if the people cannot hold the government accountable, then there need to be other mechanisms to hold government accountable for that funding. So when, in an economic sense, if the tax revenue is given up to any entity, a federal government, a provincial government, a municipal entity, a local government, each one must have accountability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ali Siddiqui. I hope you stay with us. We now go to Mr. Ali Hasnain, Associate Professor at LUMS. Ali Hasnain is an assistant professor whose research focuses primarily on how public service delivery can be improved through technological reform initiatives.
10 minutes.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and if my slide should be put up. First of all, it's a Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, Assalamu alaikum to everyone.
It was great to see Ali Sahab's speech earlier because it's pretty much the same thrust of the argument I'm going to make. Because we're looking at pretty much the same thing, we're thinking about the economy in the year 2047. Before we start talking about 2047, it's important to think, how far away is that? And one nice way to do that is to think back 25 years earlier. And that means 1997 or so. And so what I'll do in the first part of this conversation, very much in the same spirit as he has done, is think through what Pakistan's trends have looked like in the past. If you could go to the next, skip the next slide and go to the next one, please. The next one. Thank you. This is under 5 mortality rates. How often do kids under 5 die in different countries? And if you look at the green trend, that's Pakistan. We had the second healthiest kids on average in the country back in 1975. And I think this slide is important because it shows us that there is something fundamentally broken about Pakistan. We've reduced mortality because medicine is getting better and so on, just the same as other countries have. But the rate at which we've created that reduction is far slower. And so the first question, and really the biggest question we have to ask is, why? Why have we not been able to create that reduction as quickly? Could you go to the next slide, please? Next slide. So if we follow these trends, we're going to have, in 2047, we'll reach the level of under 5 mortality that our peers, by peers I mean in India and Bangladesh for the rest of this presentation, will reach in 2030. Right, so we'll be 17 years behind them for the most part. Could you go to the next one, please? Next slide, please. Now, if you think about education, the differences and the gaps are both larger today and going to get larger in the next 25 years. Leaving aside quality, which is horrendous, by the way, about half our kids do not reach class 8. Right, so pre-metric means class 8. This is completion of up till class 8. And if we continue at these levels, could you go on to the next one? Next slide. In 2047, we'll reach the level of education that India reached in 2011 and Bangladesh reached in 2016. Next slide, please. Now, if you think about manufacturing, the share of manufacturing has been in decline over the last few years, and for reasons I'll come to in a second. But if it continues like this, we will reach 9% of the economy will be made up of us making stuff, and we'll have to find other ways to earn our money. Next slide, please. This is exports, and I don't know what to tell you about exports because in the last 25 years, we've gone from 16% of our GDP being exported to 10%. In the Musharraf era, which is often held up as sort of a time of relative prosperity and stability, the dollar was kept at 55 or 60 for many years. That was Daronomics version 1, version 0 point something. The exports in this country fell from about 15.4% to 12%. That was a 20% drop in our exports relative to our size. During the years in which Dar Sahab earned the label of Daronomics, exports fell 38% relative to our size. So if we continue like this, you do the math, we'll basically have no exports. And as Economics 100 tells you, productivity in an economy comes from trade. And so if you're not trading, you basically don't have a productive economy. Next slide, please. Now, the puzzle is this. In Pakistan, we are very comfortable with slow decline. So in Lahore, we have groundwater. The tube wells are used to raise water up and to use it. 30, 40 years ago, we had water at 200 meters. Now we have water at 1200 meters. All we do every year is we dig a little deeper. We don't use our water more carefully, and it's a complicated story because India is also pumping a lot of water from the same aquifer. We've never talked to them, as far as I know, about this. But regardless, we haven't really created any conservation systems. Similar to that is this. Throughout Pakistan's economic history, starting from Ayub, I haven't seen data from before that. Ayub, Bhutto, Zia, the 90s, Musharraf and post-Musharraf, all of these eras, we've been very, very comfortable with running current account deficits, importing more than we export, taking loans to fill those gaps. And as a result, if you could go on to the next slide, the Pakistani rupee has lost 82% of value in the last 25 years and 76% of value in the 25 years before that. Next slide. Which means that in 2047, the dollar will be at between 1100 and 1600 if we keep going this way. Next slide, please. Now, this is a projection of, so the dashed line is Pakistan's GDP growth over time, and the solid line is India's GDP growth over time until the year 2050. This is FAO projects that the Indian economy will grow to 10 times Pakistan's size. Next slide. In 2047, the average Pakistani will be earning as much as the average Indian is earning today. Next slide. And there are projections that say that it can get much worse than this, that they might be as much as 27 times bigger than us, in which case you can forget about Kashmir, you can forget about, great power competition, because you're a footnote in history. And so you've got two options as a country. Either start talking to them, right? Think about 98 or earlier, we were at 1/6 India's size, now we're at 1/10. What we could have negotiated with them in 98 was much better than what we could negotiate today. We went into Kargil. But what we can negotiate today is better than what we'll negotiate in 2047 unless we start the journey of economic transformation. Next slide, please. So, what can I tell you? So we'll jump with Joy, as Javed was saying earlier. What can Pakistan do if we start transforming? Next slide. I was involved in the study 5 years ago in 2017 to think about what Pakistan can look like. It was called Pakistan at 100. We did this for 2 or 3 years. The red line here is Pakistan if we continue following the status quo, which takes us from our current income levels to about twice as much GDP per capita terms. Many people don't know that we've actually doubled GDP per capita in the last 20-25 years. But relative to other countries, we're slipping down. And so what these other trends show you is what if we grow like China did, like Malaysia did, like Korea did in the years of their transformation. And if we do that, and the green trend here is sort of middle of those countries' experience, we can go from being twice as rich as we are today to being 5 times as rich as we are today. So the problem for all of us to think about, for the political classes, for the non-political elite, and everyone, is to think, how do we create a political equilibrium that allows us to expand as a country and allow everyone to share in the rewards, right? If we're going to go down the path of reform, some people will get relatively weaker, but they will get richer in absolute terms than if they remain the most powerful people in the country, but don't reform the country. Next slide, please. One of the central planks of this is to fix taxation in this country, and if you'll go on, aware that I have just a little bit of time. Can you go on, please? Next slide, please. Thank you. The agenda for economic reform is as clear as can be. Pretty much any respectable economist that I know, very few of whom have ever been in government, agree on the agenda. The agenda is, first of all, you have to fix taxation. So I told you that manufacturing has been in decline. Here's one reason why. If you earn 100 rupees today in agriculture, you pay less than 1 rupee in taxes. If you earn 100 rupees in the services sector, you pay 5 rupees in taxation. And if you earn 100 rupees in manufacturing, you pay 32 rupees in taxes. Our tax imbalance is off the charts. And what this does is it gives large manufacturers a very defensible reason to go to the government and say, give me specific tax breaks, give me Sasti Bijli or whatever else, give me relief of some sort. What we need to do instead is to draw down those benefits, but to decrease taxation for them, so that every sector and every industry can play on a level playing field. I did a study in 2011 where we surveyed public clinics in Punjab, 850 of them across a representative sample across the province. 50% of doctors weren't showing up to work on a random check, right? And their work hours, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. So what that tells you is we're wasting half the money we're spending on health, and we're spending a pittance. We have to fix universities. I mean, it's a travesty for me to think that we have an HSC, we're spending a lot of money on it, and we have nothing to show for it at the end of the day. No one that the HSC universities are sending abroad, no new inventions being made, and we've got the worst people over the last 25 years in charge of that mess. We have to fix NFC, as Ali Sahab also said, and that is for 2 or 3 reasons, as he pointed out. So one is just we need more money for government to do the things it has to do. But also because when you devolve tax collection and you make tehsil level bureaucrats make decisions about how to spend that money, you get healthy competition going within your bureaucracy. This is what China did back in the 1980s or 1970s. In China, in other countries, your provinces and your sub-provincial administration sort of collects about 60-70% of revenue for the total government. The federal government only collects 30 to 50%. In Pakistan, I think it's something like 16% is what the provinces gather. We have to open exports, we have to reduce substitution and monitor competition, and I won't go into the detail of that, and we have to fix rule of law. And the last slide, please. We'll go on to the last slide. Here's something, and if you'll just click the button again. Here's the big problem. Could you click on the button? The next slide, please. Thank you. There's a study in the US that shows that in the 40 years between 1947 and 1987, robots were replacing some jobs, but those jobs were people were finding new things to do because automation was happening, but relatively slowly. Between 1987 and 2017, automation became so much more rapid that it started killing jobs. So the jobs that were lost to automation were not being absorbed in other sectors. Couple this with the fact that in Pakistan, up to 2047, we will have our working class population will be off the charts. And you have a recipe for widespread unemployment. And this is a problem that every country in the world will face, but it's a much worse problem for those countries that have more young people, as we do. We have one of the worst sort of demographics, if you think about it this way. And to boot, these people aren't educated. So at the end of the day, this is Pakistan at 100, unless we do something about it. Thank you.
That was a very scorching, searing portrayal, very candidly done, very frankly done, and I think follows very well on Ali Jahangir Siddiqui's presentation. An economist, a thoughtful economist who's done extensive research, following up on a person who is actually part of the financial services sector. So we set ourselves up for interactive time. Yes, yes. I see the regulars. Yes, that's very admirable of you to be so engaged. I'm just looking for those who could not possibly have gone to sleep. These were riveting presentations. Yes? Have you spoken so far? No, sir. Then you have the right to please go ahead.
Thank you so much for brief presentation. मैं सारान निसार आज़ाद कश्मीर से अभी आपने बात की कि HEC को फिक्स किया जाए. अभी आप देख रहे हैं कि यूनिवर्सिटीज़ में BPS और TTS के जो उनके ग्रेड्स हैं उनमें आपस में उनमें कॉन्फ्लिक्ट आ रहा है. और आप वो कह रहे हैं कि हमें टाइम स्केल दिया जाए टीचर्स जिस तरह टीचर्स को टाइम स्केल दिया जाता है विदाउट पब्लिकेशन. और दूसरी जगह वो कह रहे हैं कि हमारा TTS के जो मराहत हैं उनके साथ भी हमारा कॉन्फ्लिक्ट है. लास्ट टाइम NDU के एक सेमिनार में फॉरेन स्पीकर्स ने कहा कि आपकी एक भी यूनिवर्सिटी 100 बेस्ट यूनिवर्सिटी में नहीं है, जबकि इंडिया की इतनी है. तो क्या विदाउट पब्लिकेशन या इस तरीके की बात करके क्या हम 100 बेस्ट यूनिवर्सिटीज़ में जा सकते हैं?
Thank you. Any others? Sorry, I couldn't see you. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I think a very sobering session, very candid. My question is aimed at the last speaker, Professor Hasnain. Bluntly put, what is the cause? Is it policy or politics? So do you think without reviewing the political economy of Pakistan, these fundamental challenges can be addressed? If so, how? Thank you.
Go ahead.
All right. So the first question, I think you cannot reach the top 100 without publishing, that's clear. But there's a lot of nuance to this. So think about what India did. India is a great example of a country that established excellent universities, right? And they started in 1951, I think, with Nehru's Institutes of National Importance. These were institutes such as the IITs and the IIMs that were given multiples of money relative to other universities. They were given political autonomy. In other words, they were delinked from politics, and student politics was banned. And then they brought in experts from Germany and the US and Russia and from institutes such as Harvard and Princeton and whatnot to advise on the setup of these universities. And then it took them about 50 years before the IITs really started bearing fruit. Publishing is the currency of academia. It is how you measure quality. The issue is that you can't come up with your own weird ways of measuring that quality. You can't come up with your own journal rankings. This is a problem of obviously huge debate, and there are now vested interests within our universities who want to perpetuate the narrative that वो था ना degree होती है असली हो या जाली, वो publication होती है असली हो या जाली, right? So we have to have, when was the last time a president or a prime minister really went to university and said aankhein khol ke what's going on here? I don't know the answer to that. So that's the answer to you. You're absolutely right that policy, ultimately, if you have bad policies in place, the question is, why isn't your politics making that a problem for the leadership? That's a big issue. For me, institutions have to be bigger than individuals. That is something we could have talked about tomorrow, but the event has been cancelled, right? I don't know in 2047 if the chief will have an extension or not. But it's also a question we can ask from our political parties. Will we have the Zardaris and the Sharifs and whoever is in, I don't know, PTI ka kya banega? But will we have these people, or will the platform be opened? Because if you're talking about the next generation, हमारे बच्चे अभी 4-5 साल के बच्चे हैं, if they're going to be leaders, then do all Pakistanis have the right to rise to leadership? And is 3 years enough? Will institutions be bigger? इसको यहीं छोड़ देते हैं.
Thank you. Due to cruel time, and we go from that extremely uplifting, optimistic scenario to an even more uplifting one, which is climate, from the climate of finance to the climate of very soil. It's Aisha Khan, 10 minutes, but may I say that she's the founder and head of the CSC or CCMGP. God, please spell that out. Works at the community and policy level to strengthen climate action by supporting inclusive and participatory practices that promote social, ecological, and democratic equity. She is currently serving as the convener of the working group on climate security at the Strategic Policy Planning Cell in the National Security Division, which is represented by a former National Security Advisor here. Well, over to you, Aisha, 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Most grateful to IPRI for inviting me to speak from their prestigious platform, and it's always a privilege to be on a panel that is moderated by Senator Javed Jabbar. I'll make my opening statement by saying that we are looking at a planet that is warming very fast. And if we cannot keep 1.5 alive by 2030, everything else that we're talking about over here will go flying out of the window. I am a climatologist, so I essentially look at the world through the lens of climate change and what that means for the planet and for us in the developing South. I have to contextualize what I'm going to say about where I see Pakistan will be at 100 by looking at the present geopolitical scenario as well, and then I will use that as the backdrop to build on what climate impacts will mean for Pakistan. We have seen many ups and downs in this country in the last 75 years, but we've always managed somehow to bounce back. We have never seen despair hit rock bottom like we do in the present times. At the global level, I think after World War II, we have never seen international relations reach such high pitch of tension. And at the national level, again, I join the other speakers in endorsing that things have never been more dismal for Pakistan. The planet is standing at a crossroads and we are caught in the middle. The war in Ukraine, the increase in cost of energy and food, inflation, economic recession, all these things are going to have a multiplying threat effect on us and on our future. So let me just say that for every country, and Dr. Mohid Yusuf is here, that national security is the foremost priority. And if we want to reduce the expansive definition of that very big charter, it can be done in one word: human security. So if we look at human security and predicate our future on that, there are several things that fall under that ambit, but I'm only going to talk about 3 basic things over here because of paucity of time. Food, water, energy, that is the requirement of every individual in the country. And I'm going to just share quick data information with you on these 3 sectors, and I will leave you to process that information and join the dots, and then I will go on to the other vulnerabilities. So look at water, for example. Our intake of water has not reduced, but our availability per capita has gone down from 5,000 cubic meters to 960, and it's shrinking very fast. 80% of the water that we use is derived from snow and glacial melt in the upper Indus Basin catchments, and that is going to get drastically impacted by climate change, and projections are that the mass and volume will reduce up to 30 or 50% by 2050. Our per capita availability from groundwater has also declined. We have depleted that water resource, and of the 68 billion metric cubic meters available to us, we have abstracted 60 billion cubic meters. So that leaves us with hardly any groundwater to use. When we talk about food security, we need to remember that 96% of arable land in Pakistan does not have the full spectrum of organic matter. So essentially, we are not meant to be an agricultural country, but we have been an agricultural country. But in recent times, you've noticed that the 24% that accounted for agriculture in the GDP has come down to 19%, and it's going to keep going down because of the land use and of the unsustainable population growth and the need for development and the real estate now encroaching into agrarian areas. 4 crops that we grow use 80% of our water, and they only account for 4 to 5% of the GDP. Our country is facing 43% food insecurity, and 18% people are facing acute food security. Rate of country, as it was, I think, stated by one of the earlier speakers, stands at 40%. In the energy sector, it is the largest single drain on our economy. We rely heavily on fossil fuels, and most of this is used inefficiently by the industry and the transport section. We need transformation, transition to renewable energy, but we need resources, we need technology, and we need capacity. We are a country that is going to be hit by recurring disasters, hydrometeorological disasters. And there is no running away from that because global warming is happening at a pace. There is too much carbon packed in the atmosphere that will play itself out. So if recurring disasters mean increase in an exponential increase, I should say, in economic losses, it also means that it is going to be an exponential decrease in our coping capacity. Climate change will have an overarching effect on everything else. There are projections made by the World Bank that it is going to have significant losses, anything between 10 to 13% to our GDP by 2050. So even before the recent disaster that we've had now, the floods of 2022, climate change losses were estimated to cost Pakistan $3.79 billion annually. So where will all this cost of rehabilitation come from? The present floods, and I think that was also stated by one of the earlier speakers, has been estimated to cost $40 billion for rehabilitation and recovery. And this, mind you, does not take into account the secondary and the intergenerational impact of losses. 49 million people in Pakistan are already living in areas that are indicative of suffering from 4 to 5% decline in their life quality indicators by 2030. So we have to look at so many different areas. And while I leave you now to process this information, I will just take a few minutes to elaborate on what are the vulnerabilities and the causes that have exacerbated our condition and brought us to the point where we stand today. Number one is our unsustainable population growth rate. Number two is poor investment in human capital. Number three is unequal access and opportunity for women to realize their full potential. Number four is poor governance and weak institutional capacity. So on a crisis slide, when we look at ourselves, we are really slipping fast, and we're fast reaching that point of inflection beyond which we may find it very difficult to recover. So where do we want to see Pakistan at? 100 will largely depend on the choices we make and the willingness we show to adapt to change. A good entry point is to review our past policies and to rethink our future strategies. When we review our past policies, we need to look at what are the things that worked for us, what are the things that didn't work for us, and what is it that we could have done differently to be in a better place today. In plotting a future trajectory, I think it is very important to give spatial econometrics the pivot place in determining our future transformation to resilience. And I use the word resilience because that is the only thing that we should be focusing on right now. We have to come out of the state of vulnerability. And recently launched National Climate Policy recognizes geoeconomics as the fulcrum of the economic security that we need, and it is the crucible of that policy. But that policy is only a statement of intent. What we need to do beyond that is to have integration at multiple levels to realize its objectives. I think I read in the concept note also that we are geostrategically very important and we have many natural endowments. But let me ask the audience, how well have we used the geostrategic position, the gateway to Central Asia? How well have we used our natural endowments? We have not created any enabling environment to attract tourism. Opportunity for regional trade continues to remain hostage to hostilities. So we are living in a digitalized world, and we have an opportunity to become part of the digital supply chain, offering our youth an opportunity for employment, because we will have to transition from agriculture that now accounts for 60% of the employment and move to supply chains, but we have not prepared society. So I will now say something a little provocative, but it is an academic discussion, so I want you to reflect on this, that in a rapidly changing world, democracy itself will come under threat. It will pose a challenge, because the decisions that we need to take to keep pace with climate change may not be aligned with democratic dispensations and the time it requires to take decisions. So climate science is something that is not based on populism, that is based on evidence and thinking and research, and how we plot our trajectory will largely depend on how we internalize learning, how we maximize impact, and how we use and incentivize knowledge for innovation. Because the future lies in innovation, it lies in technology, it lies in science, and it lies in our ability to transform. So we need to see, are we ready to make that shift towards a transformational resilience? Because the key word here is resilience. We will have to develop our coping capacity to deal with crisis and with fragility. So unless Pakistan decides that at 100 it wants to shift from a lower middle income country and have a future that offers security, stability, prosperity, we will have to do a lot of things very differently. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for taking a holistic view rather than only looking at the ecology, even though when one says only, one is at the risk of devaluing the holistic, all-inclusive, all-pervasive relevance of the environment and what climate change means to Pakistan. Thank you, Aisha. And now open to comments or questions. Yes, sir, Joseph.
Assalamu alaikum, ma'am. My name is Atul Rahman, from student of IR from Namal University. Ma'am, what do you think the recent flood is because of climate change or government failure? Because we have faced several times in previous 2 decades.
What is happening now in Pakistan and everywhere else in the world is a result of climate change. It is a result of carbon emissions that are increasing, that have not been brought down as it was agreed at the Paris Agreement. So we are going to see more and more of these intense monsoons, and like I said, Pakistan has a topography that stretches from the mountains down to the coastal areas. So we are going to have riverine flooding, flash flooding, glacial lake outburst floods, and we are going to have more intense monsoons because the difference between the land and ocean temperature is increasing. And when that happens, there is areas of deep depressions, and they cause and trigger the intensity of the monsoons. That is what happened this year. The Met Department doesn't have impact forecasting capability in Pakistan. It has not invested in that. But even if it had, and even if we had an adaptation plan, which we don't do right now, which we should have prepared 4 years ago, we would not have been able to prepare for this kind of a disaster. We could have perhaps thought that intense means 30% more, 40% more, but this was 300%, 400% more. So Pakistan will have to develop its coping capacity to deal with recurring disasters related to climate change.
Thank you. Second and last question. Yes, Ambassador.
Thank you, ma'am. Very educative presentation. My question is that this climate change is not Pakistan exclusive. We are in a region which is prone to these shocks, and when you look at it, so we are also linked with India. So do you think that there should be an urgent dialogue between the two, or say at the SAARC level, so we can mitigate or at least take some action to mitigate the situation? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I have always been a very strong advocate of regional resilience. Vulnerability doesn't take place in isolation, and it cannot be managed by any country in isolation. I did not refer much to the Hindu Kush, Karakoram, and Himalayan mountain system through which we get our water. We are a lower riparian, we are a single basin country. So it's extremely important for us to try and take a proactive stance in climate diplomacy and to promote hydro-solidarity, because this can eventually lead to conflict and destabilization in the region.
Thank you. Thank you, Aisha. And we need to go to the last of the 5 speakers, Ms. Maheen Rehman, who will join us online, CEO of InfraZameen, and she's played a crucial part in setting up the base operations and its initial structure, where she will tell us about IZP. Maheen has over 20 years of experience in investment banking, research, and asset management. So over to you, Ms. Maheen Rehman, 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to IPRI, to Ambassador Dr. Raza, to Dr. Moeed Yusuf for having me here today. It's been very interesting to listen to all the panelists, and while I have the enviable task of being the last panelist at the end of a long day, I will try my best to add a hint or a note of optimism perhaps to close the evening off. I think we've heard very clearly what the challenges are that Pakistan is facing. We have population, we have declining manufacturing capability, declining exports, and climate now added to our list of issues to deal with. Now, where can we go from here? Because clearly the next, I would not even say the next 25 years, but perhaps the next decade will really define where Pakistan will really end up. So we don't have too much time to make decisions perhaps on the policy side. But I'll focus on a few main areas where I think we can take some steps to certainly improve what we are seeing and try and arrest some of the decline that we have witnessed in the last decade or so. First of all, let's talk about labor and let's talk about population, because the two are interlinked. Pakistan has a labor force of about 70 million people, but we define labor force as actually being people of 15 years and older. So clearly the productivity of our labor force is not at the same level that it should be. We have maybe, if we take out the 15 and maybe the under 20s, we have maybe about 40-50 million productive people with less than, I would say, a 20% participation of women in the labor force. And we are expecting these people to contribute to raising the overall GDP of 220 million. Now that's very difficult to achieve in the best of scenarios. But I think when we talk about our own labor and our ability to move our labor up the productivity curve, let's look at what's happened elsewhere. Today, Pakistan has 9 million ex-Pakistanis, expat Pakistanis living overseas. These 9 million Pakistanis overseas contribute $35 billion annually to our remittances. Compare that to the fact that the entire industrial base of Pakistan can only generate about $30 billion of exports. So let's think about that number a little bit. Our overseas Pakistani population remittances is contributing more than our exports across the entire country. And we are perhaps the most unique country in the world to see this happen. Of course, other countries also have high remittance numbers, but nowhere is this remittance versus export balance so perhaps so jarring. And perhaps we should focus on this a bit. Our population certainly is growing. We have cultural issues related around population control. So how can we harness our population in a better way so that it is more productive and it is able to effectively add to our GDP while the growth rates continue? For that, as you have seen in previous presentations, malnutrition and education and health are paramount. And here is where I think our system has failed us. But at the same time, it's not too impossible to come up with a short-term and a long-term plan and keep it consistent over the next decade or so to try and achieve our goals of having a healthier and more productive labor force. Because only then will that labor be able to contribute to our GDP and then our export base as well. I'll come next to manufacturing. I touched upon the fact that overall exports are stagnant at $30 billion. The reality is that our export base and our manufacturing capability is heavily hampered by uncompetitiveness. And that comes in the form of numerous things, but largely Pakistan has followed a fairly protectionist policy with regards to exports on the whole. Our industrialists get considerable concessions. They get access to cheaper natural resource such as gas or fuel, which in turn makes them generally uncompetitive and not able to scale up to the levels that they would be to achieve the same degree of export. So this concept has to be looked at. Why is it that our export base cannot contribute as much as the entire population of overseas Pakistanis? So the concept of rent seeking, the concept of concessions, the concept of building competitive businesses, these concepts are basic economic theory, and they really need to make a comeback in terms of long-term policy outlook. And then when we talk about coming back to the labor idea, let's talk about India here today. Let's see what India got right. We had a professor here who touched upon the IITs and the IIMs. So let's talk about the impact these have. And these were thought about well before partition, actually. Today, what the IITs and IIMs have focused on are two very simple things. One is producing quality graduates in two areas, management and technology. And over the course of the last 50 years or so, they have managed to produce almost 500,000 graduates of excellence in these areas, who are now today CEOs of some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. You will find Indian CEOs at the head of Google, at the head of Microsoft, Starbucks, and even Chanel. So compare that to our university system. Perhaps the only centers of excellence that we can say, maybe if we look at IBA or we look at LUMS, in history, we've maybe produced about 50,000 graduates, perhaps even less of that caliber. So the scale up here is necessary. Not only do we need a short-term plan to rescale our workforce, we have a very, perhaps we can say we have not high levels of literacy, but we certainly do have high levels of digital literacy. How can we utilize that in a better way to quickly upskill and retrain our workforce? And then finally build towards a long-term and a medium-term plan to build institutes that will focus on very specific areas that will enable Pakistani students to become masters in those fields. And yes, we've referred to the HEC, and I do believe that education policy and that system needs a complete revamp as well. Let's talk finally about energy and climate. And again, those two are interlinked, and they're all interlinked with the basis of the economy. So energy for us has been, I think, our weakest point. We have a heavy reliance on fossil fuels. Every time the oil price goes up, we have a balance of payments issue. Our imports jump up. Almost $18 billion today is our import bill on just oil alone. Whereas if we were to switch to renewable energy sources, there is a World Bank study that actually says if we even utilize a fraction of our land towards solar, we would meet almost 50% of our energy requirements. So perhaps that is the starting point. 50% of our energy requirements would drop almost $10 billion on our import bill, thereby releasing so much pressure on the external account. And finally, let's talk about climate change. Pakistan is not, I would say, a stranger to the floods that we've seen. In fact, floods have been a regular occurrence. 2010 was the last big one, and 2022 again now. There have been 4 flood management plans that have come out in Pakistan. The last one came out in 2015 after the wake of the floods of 2010 and 2011. And it had a 350 billion rupee investment to be made in flood management systems across the country. Unfortunately, much of that was not executed because of financing issues and financing availability. This is where we can certainly step up, relook at those plans, use the local financing market, whether they are the banks or the capital markets, and find innovative solutions to talk about green climate finance that will help us in mitigating against floods and droughts, which, as you heard, we're only going to see more of. And this is where I assure you the local market has tremendous liquidity to be able to do this. We are in a position now to push multilateral agencies to focus on these kind of funding solutions for us and rebuild the entire flood and drought management plans with better accuracy. At the same time, we do have vulnerabilities across multiple other climate areas, and these two, while the world's attention is on us at this point in time, we need to use this opportunity to talk about where that investment in climate and water particularly will come from, and how we can also have this on a commercial or a return on investment basis. for the private sector in Pakistan and for international investors as well. It is not just simply a matter of going and asking for donations in climate justice. These are very amorphous concepts. We need to build viability into our projects and on a long-term basis be able to attract commercial capital and patient capital that will help us build towards these mitigating these issues that we see today. So I'll stop here, but I hope that this gives some degree or some hope of a way forward. Our problems are certainly there. They're catching up with us. And I absolutely agree with the speakers here that the time to act is now. We do not have too much time left on this. But with a little bit of policy action and direction, we certainly can change the trajectory that we're seeing for Pakistan's next 25 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Maheen. A very apt way to conclude it. This very fine, excellent presentations by each of you, 5 persons. Is there any question specific to Maheen Rahman's presentation? Maheen, congratulations. They have endorsed every single word you have spoken. And even those words that you have not spoken, the entire unanimity is breathtaking, which allows the moderator to begin to be immoderate, which is much better than being moderate. How does one absorb and make coherence out of such a staggering set of harsh realities which indicate a profound crisis? We are, of course, extremely preoccupied with the terrible current political polarization, which often takes us away from the profundity, the fundamentality of the overall body politic. If we go by conventional mainstream media content, that fundamental reality does not get the attention it deserves. The immediacy, the relative superficiality and irrelevance gets far more attention and helps shape the national perception. Social media, in order to preserve my sanity, I am not part of social media, even though people think that I am far more insane than those who do use social media and retain their sanity. But social media is another ball game all of its own. So how do we benefit from the presentations made here in terms of conceptualizing? I mean, we are not obviously going to go out of this hall and start changing things immediately, even though ultimately the buck stops with us, with each of us. And it's not just policy makers sitting in some remote parts of Islamabad or GHQ in Rawalpindi. It's us people. That's where the buck stops. And if Pakistan is in a mess today, part of the responsibility has to be the citizens' responsibility. It's not a popular thing to say. I'm not going to win any brownie points for it. I'm going to make all of you feel very uncomfortable, so you can blame me for making the mess that we have today. I'll be your representative. But truly, the kind of changes that this particular panel has illustrated cannot begin without pain. The system by which we live is a noisy, chaotic, vibrant democracy. With all its flaws, it reflects a very democratic temperament of the people. Unlike Afghanistan, which probably also instinctively wants to be democratic, but is not multi-party democratic. Iran, I'm sure, is blessed with very perceptive citizens who want to be pluralist. But the hard fact is, Iran, our immediate neighbor, is not the kind of noisy, chaotic democracy that Pakistan is. Yes, our unfavorite neighbor to the east is. So, can we learn from India? How did they not transform, but adopt policies. India, a large part of India is still stuck in a quagmire of excessive population weightage and outdated systems. But to its credit, over the last 20-25 years, incrementally, they have retained their own chaotic, noisy democracy and been able to push through certain elements. So what's the difference in Pakistan? Is it the fact that the military takes too prominent a role in policy making? Should we blame the military for this? Or should we blame only the civilians, the political element of governance that allows the military more and more space because of its own lack of competence and comprehension or lack of integrity? That's a question that we need to ponder on. But the fact is that if we want to achieve the kind of transformational change, we have to look at the political process. Because all things are political. Even the military is political. And the kind of political transformation that we require in Pakistan today means it has to be done. And if we want to retain a multi-party, noisy, vibrant, chaotic democracy, because we are not a one-party state, if we were something like China, or perhaps even something like a theocratic republic like Iran, we might have been able to misuse or benevolently use the might of the state to enforce order and continuity and consistency and coherence in policy year after year, year after year. After Deng Xiaoping and company brought in those changes, there have not been major deviations, only improvements, incrementally. Neither by temperament, nor by the current political constitutional dispensation can we think of overnight or soon becoming a one-party state. So living with this chaotic kind of unstable polity, the first element that needs to be reformed are political parties. Political parties need to be subject to far greater regulation, not less regulation, more regulation and more self-regulation through constitutionally entitled. And I'm making a wish list, because if you're looking 25 years ahead, all you can do is make a wish list if you want to ignore some of the terrible data that we have been looking at. And the reason I focus on political parties and parliament and the legislatures will become obvious, because when I was preparing to come here, I revisited a book published 10 years ago. It was called The Future of Pakistan, edited by the late Stephen Cohen, who is regarded as one of the most informed specialists on South Asia and Pakistan. And it includes a chapter by Mr. Moeed Yusuf. And he very presciently looked at the youth dimension at that time. Of course, much of that content was fairly grim. It put you down to earth. It made you realize where we are. But it took the view at a time when we were considered a haven for terrorism. And it took perhaps an unduly gloomy view. Unfortunately, much of the gloom predicted in that has come true. I strongly urge you to go back and read that book. And we need a new edition. Perhaps now that Stephen Cohen, alas, is no more with us, Moeed might wish to make an attempt to produce a new edition. But I come very ill-prepared to talk to you about how do we change our political system. Because when I look back at how I saw the future, when Pakistan turned 50, I wrote an essay which was published in the news. And I was revisiting that essay. And I said, my God, how can anyone make the mistake of inviting me to talk about the future of Pakistan? Look at the enormous miscalculations I did in that essay. The first one was, my God, writing in 1997. I can't even now change it. It's there, part of the record. I predicted a great revolution in Pakistan in the year 2021. That was last year. This great revolution would transform. I mean, we were still 24 years before that great revolution. That great revolution, at least politically, has not occurred. Because I also foresaw literacy rising to over 90%. Well, digital literacy has certainly come. And I think we need to revisit what the traditional notion of print literacy is no longer accurate. We have audio literacy, we have phonetic literacy, we have cell phone literacy, and perhaps not 90%, but over 75% of our people have the capacity to communicate. But I also foresaw the creation of an institution called the National Forum to create a new cadre of leadership, which would become something equivalent to saints or sadhus or monks who would give up all claim to personal, professional wealth for a period of 25 to 30 years. Give it up. No bank accounts, no property. And then at the ripe age of 55 or 60, when they become dirty old men or undirty, nice young women, women never age, they would be richly rewarded by the state for abstaining from any temptation to allow power to corrupt them. Completely fantastical ideas that never came about. So should one give up? No, because I'm so fond of making mistakes and repeatedly going in the wrong direction. Let me complete my observations by saying that political parties have to be the instruments of change, to be able to develop the competence, the capability of recognizing the value of this data, of not depending on only the bureaucracy or only the GHQ to come and bail them out, but to think through things like the strategy for nuclear weapons. I've never heard of a single political party preparing a document on what should be Pakistan's nuclear doctrine. How should we be looking at this subject, even if it is not a current subject of concern? And they pay attention to it in their party manifestos, election manifestos. That's just one example. Manifestos don't constitute the kind of detailed thinking that is required at this stage. So, political party reform. The first step towards this, apart from creating a political parties commission in which all political parties must participate, which is a conundrum, how do you get them to legislate about themselves, but it can be done, is that political parties commission should also regulate its funding. The funding of all political parties must be subject to transparency, to state-administered control. If I want to donate some money to XYZ party, that donation only goes into an account controlled by the state, which is not to make the state too powerful, because the parties will themselves be aware of who is giving what money to who. Transparency, integrity. At the moment, except for one party that has been targeted, the rest of the party's funding is completely shadowed in darkness. We don't know where the money comes from. And money should go into political parties. That's one reform. But constitutionally, how do the people of Pakistan participate in politics? Attending rallies and going into jalsas is only one facet. Voting for the right candidates, producing the right candidates can only come, in my humble opinion, through introducing compulsory voting. Because at the moment, our electoral democracy does not represent the vast majority of the people of Pakistan. Ruling parties barely ever get more than 15 to 20%, maximum 25% of the total vote. And then everyone claims to represent 220 million people. My God. Not even 15, 20%, and you get a 5-year blank check to rule the country and to rule the provinces. Unlike those countries, 24 countries where you have compulsory voting. So you engage citizens, make them responsible for who you elect, and you then can't blame someone else for not doing what they should. And the second, that a winning candidate must secure a minimum of 51% or 50% plus one vote to become truly representative of the majority of his constituency. And even though under the very courageous reforms introduced by us in President Musharraf's cabinet to increase reserved seats for women so significantly for the first time in Pakistan's history, and a shining benefit is right here on stage, I think we should look at ensuring that 1/4 of all seats in every election should be contested only by women candidates, so that you remove the stigma of them being nominated on reserved seats and come as directly elected representatives of the people. And every 4 or 5 years you change to the next 25%, so that in a period of about 20 years, women constituting 49% of our population are able to be truly represented by people who have directly chosen them. That's yet another constitutional reform to invigorate the political dynamism and participativeness and sense of urgency that will come from meaningful participation of people in decision making. And if it sounds like a wish list, I have no regrets at that, because in many instances in history, Pakistani people and other people around the world have shown the capacity to make dramatic changes for the better. I was asked to respond to a question about why Pakistan need not continue with the word Islamic Republic of Pakistan. With great respect, I think we should allow that name to continue, because trying to even drop that name at this stage will create an unnecessary diversion. The word Islamic Republic does not necessarily impede us in any way from creating an ijtihadi direction for Islam, not that one which was meant to eradicate innovation. And when some of us would love to do that continuously, but at this stage, I think we can continue to be the Islamic Republic of Pakistan without doing ourselves any harm whatsoever. In conclusion, we need to remember that Pakistan, in its 100th year, will be shaped by factors over which we have no control. No control. Whether it is the advanced technologies, whether it is new economic, political forces, geopolitical forces that oblige Pakistan to become part of that process of change, we will have no control. But we can at least try to absorb that change in the least disruptive way for ourselves. But there are several facets over which we do have control. And one of those is institutional equilibrium. And the military will have to really conduct a sober, far-reaching inner review of whether there is a need to revisit the role that it has acquired over the past 75 years, the need to draw back, consciously draw back. Officially it is said that it has drawn back, but we know that factually it has not. And they do it, I suppose, with the best of intentions. But that's not good enough. And we need to make the civil political dimension, the citizens' dimension, the supreme unfettered part of policy making and decision making. The military will always play an important role, as it does in India, as it does in America, everywhere. The military is not going to just disappear, and it should not disappear. It has a very potent role to play. But it should not allow the political sphere to be resonant with this perception that everything happens because of the military. It is doing itself damage, and it is such a splendid institution, so vital, so important for the survival and the future of Pakistan. So, when I look at all that grimness, I think back to this charming result of the World Happiness Index. 2021, World Happiness Index. And they survey over 100 countries. Look it up. Guess what? With all that terrible data, with all that is wrong about us, we as a people are happier than the people of India, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Turkey, Japan. I mean, what kind of a crazy people are we? we actually respond and we say, they're asked, are you happy being Pakistani? Oh boy, they say, absolutely, we love being Pakistani. And in another survey, where they said, will you be willing to give up your life for this country? It has so many problems. Out of 24 countries, the highest number of people who said, Jaan Hazir hai, was Pakistan. 95% of people surveyed said Jaan Hazir hai. But more surprisingly, when they were asked, will you migrate from Pakistan to another country if you get a better opportunity? 75% said no, we want to stick to Pakistan. All the best. So we have a bright future ahead.
Thank you very much, Senator Javed Jabbar, for that erudite conclusion. Now I will request Senator Javed Jabbar to do the honors of presenting the mementos to our panelists. I will request Ms. Senator Krishna Kumari to kindly go ahead and receive her memento from Senator Javed Jabbar. I will now request Ms. Aisha Khan to kindly receive her memento from Senator Javed Jabbar. And I will request Dr. Ali Hasnan to do the same, please. I will now request President Ipri to kindly present a memento to our moderator for this session. Ladies and gentlemen, this formally brings us to the end of the last forum, and now we will proceed to the closing session. For this, I will now request Ambassador Dr. Raza Mohammed, President IPRI, and former National Security Advisor, and Chief Patron IPRI, Dr. Moeed Yusuf, to kindly join us on the stage, and I will also request Ambassador Inam to also join us on the stage, please. I will now request Ambassador Dr. Raza Mohammed for the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Assalamu alaikum once again. Chief Patron Islamabad Policy Research Institute, Dr. Moeed Yusuf, Chairman IPRI, Ambassador Inam, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Once again, Assalamu alaikum and good evening. I salute your patience, your steadfastness to having stayed with us for these 2 days and long sessions. I have a good news and a bad news too. So what would you like to hear first? Good news? Bad news? So bad news is that you will have to hear me for about 5 to 10 minutes. And I'll try to be as brief as possible. And the good news is that it is going to come to an end on a very sumptuous dinner, which has been laid already. So I'll not stand between you and dinner for long. On behalf of IPRI, I thank you all, and I thank all the participants, all the speakers, all the panelists for having given their valuable insights and suggestions to us. And I'm sure that all these inputs, when crystallized, are going to be of greater use to our policymakers. I hope they use. I'll be very brief in the conclusions. I think we are going to write a very detailed report, which will be the post-event report. But there are a few issues I think I would just highlight as one-liners, which have come up as a conclusion of these 2 days' discourse. The major conclusion, I think, is that the great powers competition is likely to continue for some time and in near future. Although one hears sabre rattling, but I think and pray that it does not come down to the military showdown and we do not see another war. Globalization, liberalization are facing challenges. China-USA decoupling is happening, and that is selective decoupling. They will decouple in certain things, but they will continue to interact in certain things, which is a good news. Russian invasion of Ukraine and Chinese rise occupy the West, their minds, the conduct of international relations by them. Afghanistan and counter-terrorism have gone to the back burner. And for the in near future, we will not see much of interest on Afghanistan and counter-terrorism by the greater powers. They are engrossed in their own issues. Aid from the West that had been coming, as we know, as the handouts, that has diminished and is going to ultimately diminish completely. So we'll have to stand on our own feet. Climate change is another major challenge which this country faces and many countries of the world face. However, there's one hope, and that hope lies in interconnectivity, trade, and diplomacy. And I give full credit to Dr. Moeed Yusuf, who is sitting here, for writing the 21's national security policy, in which he wrote that Pakistan will shift from geoeconomy, geostrategy, geosecurity to geoeconomy and diplomacy. But one thing which is required, or there are two things which are required for that, and that is the interconnectivity within South Asia, that is East-West connectivity plus the North-South connectivity. That may still have hope. We need to address the issues related to our inner front. Politico-economic stability is important, and we have to improve the image of Pakistan. Figures which have been shown by our experienced economists in the last session actually guide us towards another aspect, and it may sound a little odd, as a military person standing here who has been facing bullets, rockets, and artillery shells in Kashmir and Siachen from India, to think over resolving the bilateral issue and especially issues with India. That is how perhaps we may not lag behind and we may be able to defeat the figures which have been projected today. And within this context, within this East-West connectivity, within the context of shifting to geo-economy, CPEC remains a very, very important thing because we do not have any investment coming from anywhere else. It is only the CPEC, which is kind of hope, kind of possibility to go to geo-economy. So let's focus on its full operationalization and success. Measures to address issues that create societal discord is very important. And we have discussed all these issues: religion, caste, creed, sect. These are all fissures which are exploitable. We need to bridge the gaps. Forced conversions, transgender issues, which have been flagged already. Greatest capital which we have is our youth. We need to make it useful, and that is readily available, exportable material, that is readily available capital, which can help develop the economy of this country. And last point is a little different. That is about the technological advancements. And it's a thought that I carry for past few years. Technological advancements are a good news, but at the same time, scary too. Artificial intelligence is reaching towards the real intelligence, that is the divine intelligence. And it is my opinion, I may be wrong, that when man reaches the real intelligence or close to the real intelligence, that may be the end of the times and a recall from the God Almighty. With these brief conclusions, I come over to the IPRI itself, and first of all, I owe a debt of gratitude to the team IPRI for doing this wonderful job. It is your untiring efforts which have made this event very, very successful. Thank you so much. My deep appreciation, my congratulations to IPRI, and also all those who sit here and all those who participated in this dialogue. Now coming over to a very, very important issue or point. I would like to extend gratitude to our chief patron, Dr. Moeed Yusuf, who made untiring efforts in steering the reforms, restructuring, and research efforts of IPRI in the last 2.5 years. His valuable leadership and focused guidance for improving the quality of research and communication outreach of IPRI deserves generous praise. We also owe him gratitude for his constant help in raising IPRI to the level of 74th rank in the World Think Tank rating of government and semi-government think tanks. He has been the lead in organizing the content and structure of the Margala dialogues. All the Margala dialogues which have happened, this is the third one, he has been the locomotive. And I also take this opportunity to extend my gratitude to Dr. Hussain Nadeem, if he is around. He had started working on the third dialogue with us. Due to Dr. Moeed Yusuf's efforts, he raised the quality to the level of this dialogue to a veritable national policy discourse. He was instrumental in carving the future strategic vision of IPRI also, that is being published very soon. I take this opportunity to formally thank him on behalf of entire IPRI team for his patronage, help, guidance, and leadership. So I have to make a sad announcement from my point of view that he has decided to step down as patron-in-chief of IPRI with effect from 1st of December. I already miss him, and I have told him that I'm not going to let you go. Whether you go from here nowhere, I will keep following you and keep asking you for your help. And I'm sure that he's promised me that he'll be available to me and to IPRI for his guidance and leadership. When we are in army, when we retire, there are two expressions which we normally use on the retirement. We say, I'm saying farewell to arms, or I am going to hang my boots, or I'm going to take off my uniforms on such and such date. But he has decided otherwise. He has embarked upon contributions from different platforms in a different way, with rejuvenated vigor and spirit. I wish him luck. And sir, there is no doubt, and these are not the words only, it's from core of my heart, that without you, IPRI wouldn't have been where it is and where it is headed to. Thank you so much, and I now invite you to say a few words, but when he stands, I will request you all to give him a standing ovation. Please, join me.
Assalamu alaikum ji, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We've heard a lot of pessimism in the last panel. The last thing you want is a crying session here, so I want to spare everybody that. First of all, let me congratulate IPRI, the president, and also the team. Frankly, I've seen the kind of effort that's been made to bring this dialogue together, but also previous ones. For those of you who are in the think tank world, in academia, you know how difficult it is to bring such things together. And so I really do want to congratulate all of you for having pulled off another spectacular event. This is only the third Margala Dialogue, but I think all of you will agree that it's already become one of the leading voices, if you will, in terms of intellectual discourses in Pakistan nationally. So once again, you deserve all the praise. I'm also very, very grateful on behalf of IPRI to all the speakers, those who joined us online for 2 days, but especially also those who agreed to make the trek to come all the way to Islamabad and participate in person. Without all of you, there would be no dialogue. So I'm again very, very grateful for everybody's participation. IPRI, as all of you know, is an independent institution when it comes to its intellectual work, but it's housed under the umbrella of the National Security Office, National Security Advisor's Office of Pakistan in the National Security Division. And when I was heading that office, the idea simply was to begin to listen to think tanks seriously, to begin to get policy input from people who know much more than people who are fortunate enough to be sitting in an office and have to make decisions. And I must say that IPRI actually not only took off, but went through an intensive reform process over the past 2.5, 3 years when I was overseeing part of what was happening in terms of its quality, in terms of getting a completely new space, the digital sort of space and technology as part of research and peace building, and Hussain Nadeem, who I don't see here, spearheaded that process. And then develop quality international partnerships, which start putting Pakistan on the international intellectual map, which frankly we've struggled with over the years. To bring the credibility that an independent institution brings, to be able to critique, to be able to debate, and to get a nuanced and objective view of Pakistan out to the world. And I must say, on all three counts, IPRI succeeded, and succeeded much quicker and much faster than I thought it would. Ambassador Raza has mentioned number 74. That's not just a number. For IPRI to be ranked by a global ranking, the only global ranking of think tanks, to be number 74 in government-affiliated think tanks around the world, I think it's a moment of pride for Pakistan, not only for IPRI. And I hope that all other think tanks actually come up and surpass this level, as I hope that IPRI continues its journey to be in the top 50 and then top 25. All Already I think IPRI is one of the most sought voices, and the Margala dialogue is a great example of IPRI being able to convene global thought leaders to come and discuss where our world is today, what the opportunities are, and where the challenges lie for countries like Pakistan and others. I wasn't planning to, but I can't help make one comment about the previous panel and what we've heard. And I think if I were to summarize it in one line, it is that if we continue to do business as usual, we're in trouble. I think there can be no debate on that anymore. If we do still want to debate that question, we're wasting our time. But let me also say, one of the most interesting works that I got done when I was in government was looking at 8 countries that had grown more than 200%, so doubled GDP and then doubled, in the past 20 years, 25 years. Each one of those countries had exactly the kind of problems we have, had the same kind of national discourse and despondence, and had the same kind of youth opinions about we not going in the right direction. Many failed, but those 8 actually turned around their countries, and if I were to name them, you would consider them leading successes of the world today. I'm not talking of developed countries. These are all developing countries with the same kind of problems. If they can do it, there is no reason we can't do it. But there was one commonality in all of them. They agreed to change, and those who were winners in the past agreed to lose a little bit. If we are willing to do that, we will end up in the same place. If we are not willing to do that, we can discuss which leader is what, we can discuss which institution is what, we can discuss who's good, who's bad. We are not going to be where we want to be. This is a choice that I think we have to make as a country, and especially those of us who are fortunate enough to be part of the elite structures of Pakistan. If we are not willing to sacrifice, I think then the writing may be on the wall. But I have no doubt that if we make that choice and that decision, we will inshallah move in the right direction. Finally, you mentioned my stepping down. Look, I mean, I think the way this is structured, the patron of the institute is an ex officio position for Pakistan's National Security Advisor. So while I'm very grateful to Inam Saab and the board and the leadership for asking me to continue after I step down, I think it's time that hopefully whenever the next person is in that office takes over. But really, the reason I think this is the right time is that this Margala dialogue is a culmination of a 2.5, 3-year long reform process for IPRI. But it's also the beginning of a new journey. General Raza has just mentioned in passing, the IPRI will be releasing its 3-year strategic plan in the next 2 weeks. It's a plan that's gotten the ownership of the IPRI team and the board, and it gives a direction to where this institution wants to go from here and what the path to becoming a top 50 and a top 25 global institution is. And there's no better time and no more satisfaction that somebody like me can gain that we took a path, we went on a journey, we've reached a particular point, and I think the next phase is in the very capable hands of the IPRI leadership, of course the IPRI board, and whoever my successor in that office will be, I'm sure will also take a lot of pride in overseeing the work of IPRI. So with that, let me once again thank all of my IPRI colleagues frankly for having put up with me for so long. If anybody's worked with me, they would vouch for the fact it's not easy. So I thank you again. I also want to thank the team of the National Security Division and specifically the Strategic Policy Planning Cell in the NSA's office that spearheaded much of that reform in partnership with IPRI. They're not here, but they really did put in day and night to get this institution where it is. So once again, thank you very much. I will always be available to IPRI, but I'm sure this institute will go places for Pakistan. With this, allow me to declare this Margala dialogue closed. Thank you.
All
also like to make an important announcement for tomorrow. Unfortunately, as luck would have it, we are not going to be having tomorrow's session, and I would request all of you to kindly abstain from attending or coming to the venue. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of Margala Dialogue 2022. I request all our guests to kindly join us for the dinner now.